Cionel Pérez, Brandon Hyde, Mike Elias, Corbin Burnes, and more. We'll touch on all of those topics coming up on this mailbag episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, April 11th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are opening up the mailbag with the Orioles having the off day on Thursday, coming back from Arizona to come home and play the Blue Jays. I'm answering your listener questions. We will talk about Cionel Pérez's struggles. We'll talk about how the Orioles put together a lineup, the hitting approach, the offer to Corbin Burnes they made, and so much more. And it's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. But first, just wanted to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms. We're here for you 5 days a week. You can subscribe wherever you listen, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating and a review. It really helps out the show. And we're here on YouTube. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. We'll get you game recaps. We'll talk analysis, roster moves, prospects, all that good stuff. And we even have our postcast with Luke going live after almost every game here on the YouTube page as well that you can check out. And if you want to talk ball, ask some questions about the Orioles, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. And where I got a lot of the mailbag questions today is from that exact email address, because the Orioles lost another series, dropping 2 out of 3 in Arizona against the Diamondbacks earlier this week. Did get a travel off day on Thursday, and they are theoretically back in action tonight as they come back to Oriole Park at Camden Yards to start a 10-game homestand against the Toronto Blue Jays, a team they've already split a 4-game series against to open up the year north of the border. Now, there is a lot of rain in the forecast tonight, so TBD if that game even gets played. It is, of course, the Anthony Santander return to Camden Yards as well. But before we get to all that, we open up the mailbag. Thanks to everyone who sent in questions. You can always send them into the email, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. You can always leave mailbag questions right here in the Locked On Orioles YouTube page comments as well. And if I didn't get to your question, I can get to it on a future mailbag episode as I do them throughout the season. So let's kick it off with our first question of this mailbag episode. And that first question, it comes from a couple of people. Christopher and Noah sent in a version of this via email. RJP sent in a question like this in the YouTube comments as well. But basically it boils down to what was most of Christopher's question, which is, what should the Orioles do about Cionel Pérez? Should they DFA him right now, given his struggles, even though it is still early in the season? Now, let's not sugarcoat it. Perez has been bad so far this season. 5 innings of work over 5 outings out of the Oriole bullpen. 9 hits, 9 earned runs, 3 strikeouts, 8 walks, a hit batter, and a home run allowed. He allowed the long ball, his first one since May of 2023. He has allowed runs in 4 of 5 outings, and in the only scoreless outing he's had, he walked the bases loaded and then somehow got a double play ball with 1 out to get out of the jam and get out of the inning. He's also walked batters in 4 of 5 outings. He's had multiple walks in 3 of his 5 outings. It has been tough to watch. Now, his velocity on his sinker returned in his last outing on Wednesday, even though he gave up a run. He was 96, 97. It was way down on that rainy Friday night in Kansas City, the last time he had pitched before that. But it's not pleasant to watch right now. We know the command was an issue last year. His walk rate jumped to 12%, well above the league average of about 8%. It's been 5 outings, but he's walking 25% of the batters he has faced. Yeah, he has faced 32 batters. He has walked 8 of them. That is not good at all. He just can't throw consistent strikes. And he's been a sinker slider guy, and he has a little four-seamer, and he's now added a cutter this year to his repertoire. He's throwing that a little bit, just trying to mix things up and help him get righties out at a higher clip. And we know he's never been a huge strikeout guy. He's a guy who's going to throw that bowling ball sinker, look for ground balls, get double plays to get himself out of jams, and before this year, not give up home runs. It's kind of what you could get out of Cionel Pérez, who was better against lefties, and we knew he wasn't coming in as their top lefty. I think Gregory Soto had taken over that mantle, and he's certainly been that this year. And even Keegan Aiken just had a better season last year than Perez did. And there was a situation where even if Perez was fine this year, Aiken and Soto were the better lefties in the bullpen, but he didn't need to be this bad. And that is where he has gotten to. I mean, it is tough to watch. He still has the stuff. Like, that slider is still there, but it doesn't have as much horizontal break. That sinker is still there, but the command is just gone. He's got 2 more years. He's a free agent after 2026 if the Orioles hold on to him. He's in arbitration now. He's not making a lot of money. Of course, he is out of minor league options, so if the O's want to get rid of him, they would have to place him on waivers. Now, the fact that he's struggling so much makes it less likely that another team would claim him, but I still think when you've got a lefty throwing 97, who's been a big part of a big league bullpen for a winning team since 2022, that's someone I think another team would at least take a shot on with a waiver claim, try and fix him a little bit, get him to throw some more strikes, because there's still a lot in that left arm for Cionel Pérez, and he's only 28 years old. There's still outs to get, but it's just not pretty right now. Now, the bullpen right now is performing well. The non-Cionel Pérez bullpen has a sub-2 ERA at the moment, so he's not completely dragging them down. I mean, Brandon Hyde put him in there. Probably the highest leverage was when he pitched in the bottom of the 8th Friday night in Kansas City. The Orioles were down 3-2, and he just got obliterated, gave up 5 runs, and that game got out of hand. I didn't mind Hyde putting him in that spot. He was already struggling. The O's were obviously already losing the game. You would like to keep it at 3-2, but it was a pocket of lefties up in the Royals order. You just need to find out, like, can Perez turn it around and get, I wouldn't call those high leverage outs when you're losing in the 8th, but at least somewhat important outs out of the bullpen. He didn't. And I think that outing, it was important because it showed Hyde, we're not putting him anywhere near high leverage until he figures that out. And he's just been kind of a mop-up guy since then. And he can't even get outs in that scenario, which is really, really tough to watch. Now, for now, you can kind of hide him as the final bullpen arm, even with the Orioles putting Zach Eflin on the injured list and calling up Colin Selby on Wednesday. So they actually, for now, are going with 4 starters and 9 relievers instead of the usual 5 starters and 8 relievers. So they do have an extra pitcher in their bullpen, which makes it even easier to hide a guy like Cionel Pérez, who is really struggling. I mean, even though Colin Selby came up and gave up 2 runs on Wednesday, I'm not going to do a bullpen trust rankings today, but if I did, I would rank Selby above Perez. Like, even with Selby just coming up, Perez is still number 9 out of 9 of the guys I would trust in the Oriole bullpen right now. So you just hide him. You find some pockets against lefties in low leverage spots for him to kind of get his mojo back, but you don't put him anywhere near where he can truly impact a game at this point. And you can hide him as that low leverage arm for a bit, but I feel like you could find something that doesn't feel right, especially with when his velocity was down in the outing on Friday. Maybe you find something that's not feeling great. You put him on the injured list a little bit so he can reset. But when Zach Eflin comes back, when maybe Kyle Gibson is ready some point in the next couple of weeks, he did start a game in Norfolk on Thursday, Perez could be in trouble. And I think if these big time struggles last as we get closer and then into the month of May, like if it goes a month and Cionel Pérez, you just can't trust him at all, I know it'll be tough to DFA him because I'm fairly sure another team would at least take a shot on him and claim him, and the Orioles would lose him for nothing on waivers. But the O's have done this, right? They did it with Mike Baumann last year. He was a big part of their bullpen for over a year, and then he just came out and he had a bullpen spot. He won it out of spring training last year, and he was just bad. And in May, the Orioles just DFA'd him. They just had to do it. They needed to get other pitchers on the roster. He wasn't performing at all. And they lost him, and he bounced around a little bit, and now he's pitching in Japan this year, and it didn't really hurt the Orioles long-term to get rid of Baumann, although it really stung in the moment because he was also a well-loved guy in that Oriole clubhouse, and that could be the same thing with Perez. It's going to sting at the moment, but I don't think they're going to do the DFA move until they absolutely need to. So until the Eflins, the Gibsons, the Grayson Rodriguez's come back and force the Orioles' hand, you just kind of hold on to him and hide him from big spots, especially when you have an extra reliever in the pen. Now, once they do make that move, you got a couple of interesting lefties. Luis Gonzalez and Grant Wolfram, who are both on the 40-man roster, are both currently pitching out of the bullpen in AAA. Could be options if you did still want a third left-hander in the bullpen, along with Soto and Aiken if you got rid of Perez. But right now, I think they hold him, but I'm sure those conversations are beginning to be being had because it does not look good at all. Second question of the day. This one comes from Nathan via email, but I know plenty of people are wondering a similar kind of thing. Nathan asks, do you think Brandon Hyde or Mike Elias is more responsible for the righty-heavy lineups the Orioles put out there versus left-handed pitchers instead of just playing the hot hand? Now, I have not heard much from a reporter sense about how exactly the Orioles operate because they keep things very close to the vest, closer to the vest than most front offices in Major League Baseball. Like, not much gets out of this Orioles front office, and that's really how Mike Elias runs things. But I do know that other teams, especially other ones that are very data inclined, say the Rays, the Yankees, teams like the Brewers, the Guardians, others, they have the front office, and that's really, at this point, it's like more than half of Major League Baseball teams, 20 plus, that operate like this. They have the front office, not just the GM, but a lot of the data people and the people up in the front office that work with Elias play a very heavy role in creating these lineups, generally how it goes with a lot of these other teams. And my assumption is that this is how it works with the Orioles as well, is that the front office team pours over the matchups and the numbers and who hits well against who, how this pitcher's certain release point or the mix he has or the way his pitchers move, how that matches up against a certain guy's swing. Does he have a flatter swing? Does he have a scoopier swing? Does he hit the ball hard? Does he hit the ball softer? Whatever it may be, that all comes into play. And the front office puts together an optimal lineup. And that's where Brandon Hyde chimes in. He's the guy who's in that clubhouse, in that dugout every single day. He knows who's hurting, who needs a day off, who might ask for a day off, who just says they don't see this certain pitcher very well, who they might want to hide against a certain lefty for a reason, who needs to get a day in the starting lineup to make sure they don't get rusty. That is where Hyde's input comes in. And that is all brought together every single day to create the best lineup that the Orioles can make. And the order of the lineup and who's in there, it's not a huge thing that moves the needle throughout a 162-game season, but there are important decisions to make every single day. It is a collaborative effort. This is not the 1980s, the 1990s, where the manager is making the lineup every single day and he's not listening to the GM. The GM acquires the players, and once he does it, he's out of it, and the manager makes every other decision. Like, you can choose to not believe that, I guess, but it's been written about many a times about teams around baseball. Like, you've seen Moneyball. Like, that is how a baseball franchise operates in 2025. It's just the reality of the situation. Mike Elias and the Orioles fall in line with a lot of those other teams that do that. I would make a strong guess that is how the Orioles operate as well. It's a lot of the data people putting it together. Hyde puts kind of the personal input from how the guys are feeling, and that is how they make their lineup. And I know this question comes from the Sunday lineup in Kansas City when the Royals had lefty Chris Bubich out there, and the Orioles stacked their lineup with righties, even though lefties like Cedric Mullins and Heston Kjerstad and Jackson Holliday were playing well. They were all on the bench for that one. And I'll tell you that it's kind of some of Elias and his people and some of Brandon Hyde. They come together to make that lineup. And I mean, Cedric Mullins clearly deserved a day off. He's a veteran. He had played in every game. He deserves a day off, especially against a lefty. And he was putrid against left-handed pitching last year. It's a Sunday getaway day. That is the perfect time to get a veteran like Mullins a day off. And guess what? We're in 2025. Most players are not playing 162 games. They're going to get days off to save their legs for the second half of the season and the postseason. Again, just a fact of baseball that you got to kind of get over. Now, yes, they did start Jorge Mateo and they started Ramon Laureano, and Laureano hasn't hit so far. And I think I've made my feelings known about Jorge Mateo and why he just should not be on this roster. But if those two guys are going to be on the roster, they need to play at least a little bit. And the Orioles signed Ramon Laureano to a one-year deal this offseason to specifically be a platoon bat who starts and hits against lefties, because that is what he did for the Braves last year. And that is what the Orioles signed him to do for their team this year. And maybe eventually a guy like Ramon Laureano just continues to not hit. And at that point, the O's sign him to a cheap one-year deal. They can release him, DFA him. They can call up Dylan Carlson, who they got. They can move to other potential prospects, a Judd Fabian or a Dylan Beavers, give a guy like that a shot. Like, they have options, but you want to at least give Laureano a runway, who is a proven veteran, who's been in the big leagues for a while and had a really good season in Atlanta last year hitting lefties. He's not going to start against righties, but you're going to let him have a chance over a couple of months to do what you signed him to do before you make a decision. And you can't be wasting roster spots. Again, not many teams play the same 9 guys every single day. They have strong benches, especially good teams have strong benches, and they rotate those players in to make sure that they are parts of the lineup. They stay fresh, they get on their feet, they get at bats, so they are ready always when their time comes. If you're going to roster these players, you're going to play them. And guess what? Brandon Hyde's not the one who makes the roster decision. That is pretty much solely Mike Elias and his people in the front office. And then they're going to combine to play those players. Now, again, I've made it clear, I don't think Jorge Mateo deserves a roster spot on this team. And I think the one issue with Sunday's lineup is you could have just played Ramon Laureano in center field, a position he's not as good at as the corners, but a position he can certainly play and even has played some innings there so far this season. If you want to give Mullins the day off, totally fine with me. Play Laureano in center field, play O'Neill in one corner outfield, and then just start Heston Kjerstad against a lefty in another because he's been swinging it fairly well, and give him a chance against a left-handed pitcher. That's what I would have done, but that is because I don't think Mateo should be on this roster. If he's going to be on the roster, you at least got to find some spots to start him. It's not smart to roster a guy to have him always be on the bench. He's got to start a few times. You never want to start him against a righty, so it's going to have to be against a lefty. And the way the Orioles infield looks, you don't want to sit all those guys. The opening is in the outfield with Cowser injured and Mullins getting the day off. I also don't really think Mateo's a center fielder, and obviously he made a huge gaffe in the first inning. Luckily, that has since been changed to an error instead of a triple, so Povich has lost 3 earned runs off his record, which I'm sure he's happy about, but still not pleased with the play Mateo actually made in the first inning in center field. But if he's going to be on the roster, got to find some place to play him. I just wouldn't roster him. And remember, if Colton Cowser were healthy, he would be starting in center field against lefties when Mullins gets the day off. You just don't have that, so you have to reach a little deeper into the bag. And again, overall, it's a combo of Hyde and the front office. Brandon Hyde, yeah, he's there to make baseball decisions and make bullpen moves. We're getting input on that before games as well, where to go to guys, what pocket to go to certain relievers, what matchups, all that good stuff. For a manager in 2025, again, this is just the reality of Major League Baseball. Some of their biggest duties are managing the clubhouse, managing the personalities and the people, and having a good line of communication between your other coaches and your players. Managing relationships is just as important as managing the tactics on the field in 2025 in a Major League Baseball manager. I honestly believe that because there are so many people in the front office who every second of every day are working on how to just get an inch better on the field. And Hyde and managers across the league are about managing those relationships. And that's kind of where I stand on Brandon Hyde too. Like, I don't think fans or even me and other people who are kind of tangential media will really ever know if Brandon Hyde, quote unquote, deserves to be fired. Like, when that moment could come, it's because you're not going to fire managers solely on the poor play on the field. Like, if it gets terrible and the Orioles are 20 plus games under 500 in June, Brandon Hyde might lose his job. But if they're at least staying in this thing and they're not playing their best baseball and he's maintaining good relationships in the clubhouse, he's going to keep his job. If he's lost the clubhouse and he's not maintaining those relationships, that's not something we're going to be able to see from the outside, but that's something the front office and ownership is going to know. And that is going to be more so what may push them to make that decision. Because remember, if you want Brandon Hyde fired right now, whoever they bring in, whether they would promote, a Robinson Chirinos or a Buck Britton to be an interim manager or whatever, Anthony Sanders, Tony Mansolino, whomever it may be, or bring someone in from the outside for the rest of the season, that person they bring in is going to have to line up with Mike Elias and his people. That person is going to make 99% of the same tactical in-game decisions because they're mostly coming from the same front office. And I think that's where the disconnect is. Like, you're not going to bring in Joe Madden, Buck Showalter, and just let him take over the organization. Like, this is Elias and his people's organization. The manager is just another wing of that. And I think that's where the disconnect is, because I think people think that if you just fire Hyde and bring in someone else, they're going to do things totally differently. They won't. If you're going to fire Hyde, you're doing it because you feel like there's a disconnect relationship, communication-wise in the clubhouse, and you need a fresh new face to kind of come in and lead things. It's not really about the tactical baseball decisions at this point in 2025, but it's kind of a long way to answer that question. 2 great questions so far. We continue with some talk about the Orioles' tactical approach and their hitting. And we'll talk about Corbin Burnes as well. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. And do you need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for the extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's at supplyhouse.com. So we move on to our third question of the mailbag episode. It comes from Adam via email, who asks, can you speak to the hitting approach for the Orioles so far? It feels like in all the losses, they've let pitchers be too efficient and have been too aggressive at the plate. Now, what I will say is their hitting approach from year to year may have changed a little bit. There's been a shakeup with the Major League hitting coaches. Obviously, Matt Bergschulte and Ryan Fuller are out. Cody Asche being promoted to kind of the head role. The Orioles bringing in Tommy Joseph, making some promotions as well. They changed up some things, but in general, they're still going to be doing the same thing. They're still trying to hit the ball hard in the air and do damage, because that is what the data tells you. You hit the ball hard, you hit it in the air, a lot of good things are generally going to happen. And are they hitting the ball hard? Yes, they are. 43.7% hard hit rate as a team is fifth best in Major League Baseball through 13 games. That is a good sign. They're making good contact, hitting the ball hard off the bat. Are they hitting the ball in the air? Not so much. And that, I think, has really been the issue. Because even if you look at Wednesday's game, felt like a pretty lifeless performance. They lose 9-0 to the D-backs. They get 4 hits, all singles, and 2 walks. That's all the offense does as they lost that series. But you dig a little deeper, you say, they had 13 hard hit balls as a team in that game. And remember, if you checked out my Wednesday episode breaking down what stats I talk about, a hard hit ball last year in Major League Baseball had a 490 batting average. So generally, if you're hitting it hard, half the time you're ending up with a hit. So only 4 out of 13 saying, they might be getting a little bit unlucky, which they certainly were when they were trying to kind of attack early against Brandon Pfaadt on Wednesday, and even some against Merrill Kelly in Arizona on Tuesday, but they're just not hitting it in the air. The Orioles have 12 home runs this year. 6 of them came on opening day. 10 of them total came in the first 3 games. Since then, 2 homers in the past 10 games. And in the past 10 games, they are 29th in baseball in slugging percentage. It's mostly because they're not hitting homers. They have the 5th highest ground ball rate, but they are still 5th in baseball in hard hit rate. What that means is they're still hitting the ball hard, but they're hitting the ball hard on the ground. And that is not good enough, because the best thing that can happen if you hit the ball hard on the ground is maybe you hit it down the line for a double. Mostly the best things that'll happen is you hit it hard enough where it gets through the infield for a single. You hit the ball hard in the air, you can get singles, but you can also get doubles, triples, homers, and those are better than singles. And when you hit the ball hard on the ground and it goes right at defenders, it leads to more double plays. And the Orioles have grounded into 16 double plays so far this year. That leads Major League Baseball after they set an all-time record last year for fewest double plays grounded into in a 162-game season. So some of that is swing-related. Some of it is pitch recognition. There's a lot of different things that can lead to guys hitting the ball hard, but hitting it on the ground. And the question also asked about being too aggressive. The Orioles actually aren't doing great when swinging at the first pitch this year, and that is unusual for them and unusual for teams that have this approach. The Orioles have just a .621 team OPS this year when swinging at the first pitch. That's pretty low and pretty out of character for this Orioles team. Last year, the Orioles had a .778 OPS when swinging at the first pitch. Only the Yankees were better when doing that last year. The Orioles were the second best offense in baseball last year when they swung at the first pitch. It did a lot of good things for them, especially in the first half. It hasn't really done it through 13 games this year. They've been swinging at strikes, but maybe not the right strikes, and maybe more teams are catching on and are throwing the Orioles more pitches on the corners, more breaking balls, more pitches out of the zone on the first pitch. And now the Orioles have to adjust back the other way. The good part is they are not having swing and miss problems. And all the swing and miss metrics, whiff rate, swing, strike rate, chase rate, they're all in the top half in terms of kind of avoiding those things so far this season. So those things have not been a big issue. It's not like they've had a crazy strikeout issue, which is good. They are putting the ball in play even more than they were doing last year, and they're hitting the ball hard. Over time, as long as they start to elevate a little bit, it's going to lead to a lot more offensive success. That is why I'm not panicking about the Orioles offense. I'm panicking a little about the starting rotation, but the bullpen's been great. The offense has all the tools in the tool belt to just get over the hump at some point here soon. So that's why I'm not super in panic mode at this moment. Next question comes from Veronica via email. This one having to do with some of the news this week. Does the reported Corbin Burnes contract offer make you think differently about how the Orioles front office is currently operating? Good question. If you missed the news this week, both Rock Kabako of Masson and Andy Koska of the Baltimore Banner reported this week that the Orioles' official, final, and best offer to Corbin Burnes this winter was a 4-year, $180 million deal. Burnes, who spoke to the Orioles media this week for the first time, because obviously he signed with the Diamondbacks, he didn't pitch against the O's, but he was there. He said their best offer was 4 years. He said he thought they might push to 5, but they were never going to push to 6. He ended up getting 6 years, $210 million from the Diamondbacks. Burnes did not reveal the full number, but the media got the sourcing and did. Now, we kind of knew this was around the number that I'd been talking about because we had good reporting that showed the number the Orioles offered Burnes would have been their biggest contract ever, which means it would have been more than the $160 million they gave to Chris Davis. And we also got reporting that the offer they made to Burnes in total money was less than the $210 million he got from the Brewers. So we knew it was somewhere between 160 and 210. And stuff I had heard is that there was no way the Orioles had offered any pitcher a contract of more than 4 years. So my guess was about 4 years, 170. Turns out it was about 4 years, $180 million that the Orioles offered to Burnes. And Ken Rosenthal reported that that offer did not include any deferred money. That kind of gets pushed past the 4 years. It would have been a true 4-year deal for $180 million, where the Orioles might have tinkered with it a little bit and had some opt-outs early in the year, but it would have been generally $45 million per year to Corbin Burnes, which is a pretty penny. It would have been the highest average annual value ever for a starting pitcher. And I think this kind of makes sense considering what we know about the front office. We know David Rubenstein has said he has no spending limits on any kind of payroll for this team. And we know that he and Mike Elias, from reporting and kind of things they talk about, are wary of giving out long-term contracts in free agency, especially for pitchers who are so injury prone. The only multi-year deal they've given out is Tyler O'Neill, and even that one has an opt-out after this first year. And I've also heard that this offer they made to Burnes is the only 4-year offer that they have made to a starting pitcher in free agency since Mike Elias took over. They've made a lot of 2-year and 3-year offers to different free agents, but this is the only 4-year offer they've made. They clearly saw Corbin Burnes as a special player and a cut above. And paying $45 million per year for one player sounds like a lot, but it tells me that David Rubenstein is willing to take the payroll to really any number on a year-by-year basis. Like, for example, they'd be fine taking on a veteran who has a huge deal in a trade if he only had, 1 or 2 years left on that big deal. But if there are pitchers who are willing to take shorter deals because they're older, or maybe they're coming off a down year and need to prove it, like the Orioles feel like, hey, if it's a 1 or 2 or 3 year deal, they feel like they could beat any offer financially because they're not getting in it and the risk for the long haul. But trying to get a Blake Snell, a Corbin Burnes type in free agency, or coming up this year, a Dylan Cease, a Framber Valdez, even a Michael King, may not be in their range because they don't seem willing to go past 3 years. Again, they went to 4 years, but that seemed like a special case for Burnes, and really aren't going to go past 3 years on their offer. So they might make these giant offers. Hey, we'll give you 3 years, $120 million. But if a player wants that long-term security of 6 or 7 years, like we've seen the Max Frieds and the Garrett Coles get, I don't think the Orioles are playing in that bin. And I have some thoughts about if they should and why they should at least make an exception for one pitcher to get a true ace on this staff long-term, especially seeing what is going on with the rotation so far this year. But I think to answer Veronica's question, it actually doesn't make me think that differently, because what we've heard Rubenstein and Elias say and what I've heard about this front office kind of falls into place. Like, Rubenstein's big difference on this team is opening up the year-to-year checkbook. Like, any 1-2 year deals, he'll willing to pay whatever. But Elias and him still wary of the long-term commitments. And at some point, you just got to be riskier. And we've talked about that, but that didn't surprise me super. But I think overall good sign. They were willing to offer somebody 4 years, $180 million, especially a starting pitcher. I think that means they're going to be in play for some of these guys come next offseason, but they're going to have to push themselves and be a little bit riskier when they make these offers. 2 more questions to get to finish things off. One about the current state of the injuries in the rotation, and one about the players the Orioles have traded away. Those are coming up next. So we got 2 more questions to get to on a mailbag episode. The first one comes from Brady via email, who asks if there are any further setbacks with Zach Eflin, Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, Tyler Wells as they return from injury. Can this team make the playoffs? Brady, this team can make the playoffs with any combo of starters. This bullpen and this offense can be that good that they could drag this team to the playoffs with any combination of 5 of all the starters they have via depth at the moment. And obviously they could always trade for someone or multiple people at the deadline to supplement the rotation as well. But the timelines for those 4 starters you mentioned, they're obviously going to be a huge factor. Now, Zach Eflin, he's been shut down for a week, just went on the 15-day IL with a minor lat strain. Hopefully he'll be back late this month. Grayson Rodriguez has thrown 3 or 4 bullpen sessions, but has not yet started a rehab assignment. He was shut down in spring due to elbow inflammation. It's not ligament damage, which is good, but he's still kind of fully ramping back up. So hopefully sometime in May or early June, he can be ready to pitch. Kyle Bradish, we got an update, I think late last week. He's up to throwing 90 miles an hour in flat grounds, but has not yet thrown off a mound yet. He's still kind of TBD on when and if he'll be back this year after getting Tommy John in June. And then no real updates on Tyler Wells. He was home for a bit for the birth of his kid. Congratulations to the Wells family, but he had the internal brace surgery back in June. I think the hope is for an August-ish return for Tyler Wells, and that'll change the timeline whether they want him back as a starter or back as a reliever when he first gets back to the big leagues. Now, I do think the Orioles had to plan like they weren't going to have Tyler Wells or Kyle Bradish at all. Now, there's a good chance they get both of them back at some point, but if there are setbacks for either, they could be out for all of 2025. And I think the Orioles came into this season planning to not have either, because you cannot rely on guys who got TJ last June to help you in the next season. The Orioles know that. That is why they went out and added a lot of starting pitching depth this offseason. Now, the big one is Grayson Rodriguez. His injury right now doesn't seem long-term. The hope is he'll be back in June at some point after this full build-up if it goes well. But if Grayson's injury becomes long-term or even season-long, that could be a punishing blow. And the same thing if Zach Eflin's injury, which looks like months or weeks right now, turns into him being out months with this shoulder issue and this lat issue. That would be a gigantic blow, because with the injuries they had, Rodriguez and Eflin came in 1 and 2, and now they are both on the injured list. I mean, you really think about the current state of the Orioles rotation, like it's not good. They have 4 guys there right now. And it's Charlie Morton, who's struggling mightily, Dean Kramer, who's struggling mightily, Tomoyuki Sugano, who's looked good, and Cade Povich, who has been okay at best. And then, they might not need a 5th starter for a little bit, but if they do, it's going to be Brandon Young, just added to the 40-man, making his major league debut. Like, that's going to be your 5 starters, at least until hopefully Eflin's injury is short and he comes back later this month. Like, it's not a good spot the Orioles rotation is in right now. And they're hoping that they can get Grayson and Eflin back in the first half, kind of settle things back down. Kramer and Morton pull it back together. And then the big reinforcements late are Bradish, is Wells, and maybe hopefully some trade deadline acquisitions. But yeah, like if Eflin and Grayson are longer term than we think, they would need Kyle Gibson to be good, who they signed to a 1-year deal. He made his AAA first outing on Thursday through 47 pitches, 3 innings and change. He's probably going to need at least 1, if not 2 or 3 more AAA starts before he's ready. So probably targeting around May 1st for Kyle Gibson to be good and rejoin this rotation. And, if you didn't have Eflin and Rodriguez for long-term as well, you would need Chase McDermott and Trevor Rogers, who have both begun the year on the injured list. McDermott with the lat issue, Rogers with the knee issue. Like, both those guys have been throwing bullpens. They haven't quite gotten back into the AAA rotation on rehab yet, but those are 2 guys who probably won't be reinserted immediately into the rotation in the big leagues when they're healthy, but will be in Norfolk. And if you don't have Eflin or Rodriguez, you need Rogers to regain his old form with the Marlins, and you need McDermott to, after making 1 big league start, be the kind of pitching prospect that the Orioles see him as right now. It's kind of the number 1 pitching prospect in their system currently. You need McDermott to step up. And that's a lot to ask of guys you don't have super high expectations for this year. So to put it into words for Brady, like if it's setbacks for Eflin and Rodriguez, the Orioles would have to do a lot to turn this into a postseason team. And the final question of the mailbag comes from Jim via email, who asks, looking at the Orioles' recent trades, which of the players they gave up in those trades would currently be on the active 26-man roster if they were still in the organization? I said 3 of the players they've traded away. Now, the caveats were, these are the players who they traded away when they were either prospects or really young players. So I'm not counting Austin Hayes, who was dealt away first for Anthony Dominguez. And I'm not counting anybody who hasn't debuted in the big leagues, either with the Orioles or with their new team. So guys like Moises Chase or guys like Jackson Baumeister, I'm not, Mac Horvath, I'm not really counting in this. I'm counting guys who were young players with the Orioles and who have at least debuted in the big leagues with either the O's or with other teams. My first yes is Joey Ortiz. He was sent away to the Brewers in the Corbin Burnes trade. He's been a starting infielder for the Brewers since last year. Not sure if he's a starter right now over Westberg, Holiday, and Gunnar Henderson, but he'd at least be in the mix. I mean, at the very worst, he'd be rostered over Jorge Mateo. He could probably be rostered over Ramon Arias right now as well. I would certainly take Joey Ortiz on this team, although he has been struggling early this year with the Brewers. DL Hall also traded to the Brewers for Burnes. I would also say yes if he's healthy. He was injured for a lot of last year. Guess what? He's on the 60-day injured list to begin this year with the Brewers. But in a world where he's healthy, I would absolutely roster him over Cionel Pérez as the third left-handed reliever in the Orioles bullpen. No questions asked. And then the final guy would actually be Easton Lucas. You remember Easton Lucas? He was a pitcher the Orioles got in the Jonathan VR trade. And then they sent him to the Athletics when they traded for Shintaro Fujinami before the deadline in 2023. Now, Lucas has bounced around a couple of teams since then, but he found his way to the Toronto Blue Jays this year. They've stretched him out as a starter. They called him up when they had an injury. And Easton Lucas, in 2 starts for the Blue Jays, has thrown 10 1/3 scoreless innings. So I'm not sure what the future of Easton Lucas is, but right now, I would easily at least give him the roster spot that just went to Colin Selby when Zach Eflin went on the IL, and have Lucas be the Orioles' 5th starter while Eflin is out. Like, that would be an easy yes for me right now. So those would be the 3 yeses. Here are the no's. Darell Hernaiz, the young infielder traded to the A's for Cole Irvin. I would say no. He had a 50 WRC plus, which means he was 50% worse than a league average hitter in 135 plate appearances at the big leagues with the A's last year. He's now back in AAA and kind of struggling. Cesar Prieto, the kind of slap-hitting Cuban infielder the Orioles traded to the Cardinals for Jack Flaherty, I would say no. He still has not debuted in the big leagues with St. Louis. He had a 95 AAA WRC plus last year. Drew Rom, the left-hander, also traded for Jack Flaherty. I would also say no. He did pitch a bit in the major leagues with the Cardinals after that trade in 2023. Then he got shoulder surgery, has not pitched in professional baseball since then. He would be a no. Kyle Stowers dealt to the Marlins in the Trevor Rogers trade. I would say no. He was solid to start the year last year, but was bad with the Marlins last season. He's been a little better with Miami to begin this year, but I'd rather have Heston Kjerstad in that role as kind of the in and out of the lineup, left-handed hitting outfielder. And even Ramon Laureano, in theory, fits this roster a little bit better. Like, I'm not really sure there was a spot for Kyle Stowers. Connor Norby, I'm also going to say no. Might get some arguments on this one. Let me know in the YouTube comment section if you want to argue no. But he was also traded for Trevor Rogers to the Marlins. He's injured right now with an oblique issue, but he was good with the Marlins after the trade last year. I just think in a world where you would have all these guys in the organization, so you would also have Joey Ortiz, you probably have room for only one of Norby or Ortiz. And while Norby has the higher ceiling as an offensive player, Ortiz has still been a solid hitter, and Ortiz is worlds above Norby defensively. The Orioles need some defensive help right now. I would take, in a world where you have one spot for the two of them, which they would probably be in if they're all in the org, I'm taking Joey Ortiz over Connor Norby. He was a higher ranked prospect too. Like, I'm taking Joey Ortiz there. And the final guy is Seth Johnson, right-handed pitcher who the Orioles got in the Trey Mancini trade, then sent to the Phillies in the Gregory Soto trade. I would also say no. He briefly debuted with the Phillies at the end of last year, but the stuff looks a little down. He just doesn't look super ready. He is back pitching in AAA with the Phils right now. Even with the Orioles needing starters, I'm not sure he's a starter long-term, and with the bullpen being this good, I don't really think there'd be a spot for him on this current roster. But I really like that question from Jim. Kind of a good time to check in on the players that really over the last 2+ years is what I did it for, that the Orioles have traded away to upgrade their current major league team. But that'll do it for today's episode and for this week. Thank you so much for sending in mailbag questions. Again, send in some more lockedOnOrioles@gmail.com. If it didn't get answered, may get to it on a future mailbag episode. It's Orioles and Blue Jays this weekend. The O's are back at home trying to turn things around at 5-8 on this season so far. Blue Jays coming in at 8-6. They were just walked off on by the Red Sox on Thursday night, but otherwise been playing some really, really good baseball. Of course, the two teams split a 4-game series in Toronto to begin the year. Bowden Francis, the right-hander, goes for the Blue Jays tonight in Game 1. That is a 7:05 start. Francis, in his last start, he went 5 1/3, 2 runs against the Mets. That game will be on MASN. Tomoyuki Sugano, who looked really good in his last start, will go for the Orioles. Theoretically, is also the return for Anthony Santander to Oriole Park. Should be an amazing ovation for him. The only issue is the forecast. It looks like rain, and more rain, starting at 6 a.m. and lasting all day long tomorrow. It could happen, but I'm doubting a baseball game is played. Either way, there will be a game Saturday and maybe 2 games on Saturday, depending on the rain. 4:05 on MASN. Jose Barrios, who the Orioles lit up on opening day, will go up against Cade Povich, who just saw his ERA drop to 3.48 because that Mateo play was called an error in Kansas City. So 3.48, it's not looking too bad compared to the rest of this Orioles rotation. And then finally, on Sunday, the capper 1:35 on MASN. Easton Lucas, who we just talked about, will make his 3rd start in a Blue Jay uniform. He's been scoreless so far, and it is TBD for the Orioles. Remember, that is Zach Eflin's next spot in the rotation. It will either be Charlie Morton, who would be on regular rest to start that game Sunday, or the Orioles could call someone up to start, theoretically Brandon Young, or someone like Cody Poteet or maybe Roansy Contreras could come up and make that start. And then I will be back with you on Monday, recapping everything you need to know from hopefully the 3 games played between the Orioles and the Blue Jays in what will be definitely a rainy weekend in Baltimore here coming up. So I'm back on Monday. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.